Hey everybody, Weston with Carry Concealment. Thank you for checking out the new X1 Raptor. I wanted to show you a few features about the X1 and what kind of sets it apart from other competition holsters, along with giving you a few quick little adjustments you can make to really fine-tune this holster to fit your needs. Again, this is a competition-specific holster, so please bear that in mind as we're going through some of the settings. So let's go over a couple of key features about the X1. Obviously, the thing that is really setting this holster apart is the magnet base. So I'm going to grab my P10 and kind of show you what that's all about. The holster is overbuilt in the traditional sense. So the trigger guard area has larger bushings in place so that it's not actually having much or any friction at all on the trigger guard system. Traditionally, that would mean that you would just have a holster bucket and your pistol would just come right out, whether you wanted it to or not. I know a lot of competition shooters that will loosen the screws on their retention system to have a holster that literally has no friction. That's fast, but it's also not very safe when you're going around taping targets and in between stages. So what we've done instead is we've added a Tegris bridge here on the bottom of the holster, and we've placed a magnet on the inside here. That magnet is going to make contact with the muzzle of the firearm and give you anywhere between 3 to 7 pounds worth of magnetism to act as retention. The benefit of this over traditional trigger guard type retention is that once you've broken free of the magnetism, the gun is going to come right out as if there was no retention on the firearm. So this is a big advantage as far as speed and repeatability, and the magnetism is adjustable, so you can set this up to be essentially zero magnetism and have a just complete race setting, or you can dial it up and get a decent amount of retention, almost as if it was kind of your standard trigger guard retention setting. Let's talk about a couple of things regarding the Mach 1 and its magnet setup. So the magnet sits here inside of the bridge and makes contact with the barrel of your firearm as it's holstered. Now, the magnet is a little bit larger than your average 9mm barrel, but something I wanted to talk about is how you can adjust the retention of your holster by moving this magnet. So if you'll notice here, there's a little slot and the magnet can travel north or south in this slot. Now the reason why that's kind of important is when we're holstering the firearm and the muzzle comes in contact with the magnet, if that magnet is offset like so, you're going to have a lot less retention on the magnet because we have an imperfect contact with the barrel. So when this barrel comes into contact perfectly centered, that's going to have a maximum effect on retention. If it is off-centered one direction or another, it's going to have less retention. So that is one way that you can change the retention. The other one is going to be this little sticker that is covering the magnet. Now this is a neodymium magnet. It's about 7 pounds in strength. It does have a slight polymer coating over the top of it, and it's going to come to you with one of these Cordura stickers over the top of it. There's a couple of reasons for that, we'll get into it. But as far as your retention goes, you're also going to have an additional sticker, so you can stack these up to create more distance between your muzzle and the magnet. That will reduce retention. There is also a loop Velcro sticker that is going to create a fairly large buffer that you can go over here, and that will almost eliminate the retention. It's going to be your decision as to which kind of setup you want, but between moving the magnet north and south and changing the stickers, you can kind of fine-tune the retention. Additionally, when I first started doing these, I used a roll of goon tape, and I would just put a piece of goon tape over this, and then I would kind of fine tune it with 2, 3, 4 layers of goon tape to get the perfect retention for me. You can also do the same thing with electrical tape or any other tape. Honestly, this is not rocket science. It's just a magnet. So create a little bit of a buffer between your muzzle and the magnet to kind of change up the retention based on what you need. If you are going to run a setup like this where the holster has very little grab on the firearm, then what I'm going to recommend you do is use the optional hood. So this is a 3D printed hood for the SRO. We support SRO, Delta Point Pro, and both of the SIG 3XL and 3 Max. This little shot cord piece will go around the bottom of the Tegris bridge. There's little grooves that are designed specifically for that, and the hood will come up and over and press onto your optic. So what this does is essentially gives me level 2 retention. This gun is not going to come out at this point. And in between stages, this is a really safe way to have my holster set the way I want for the stage, but also keeping it safe during the rest of the match when I'm not shooting. Additionally, you're getting the obvious protection for your optic, which is great, especially if you're in rainy or dusty environments. When you go to start the stage, remove this, toss to the side. You can stuff this end in your pocket or your belt to keep it handy. You know, a lot of you guys run optic covers anyways, so it's kind of a familiar thing, but you're getting the added benefit of the level 2 retention. And now my holster and my firearm are ready to race. There's a lot of folks, especially in carry optics, who are starting to run pistol mounted lights. The problem with pistol mounted lights in competition is most holsters aren't really great for racing when you have a light on board. The holster needs to grab hold of the weapon light since the trigger guard is now built over because of the design of the holster. So what we're doing now is we're traditionally grabbing the bezel of the X300 like we would here, or the TLR1, making that our point of retention. With the X1 Raptor, we're able to use the magnet on the muzzle just as we did for the non-light bearing holster, and we can overbuild the retention just like we did for the trigger guard on the light body. So now what you have instead is a holster that is secure but extremely fast for light bearing holsters. I honestly think the X1 Raptor is going to completely take over the light bearing side of carry optics and USPSA in general. So if you're running a weapon light, seriously give this some consideration. I've made light bearing holsters for years. There's a lot of other companies that have also. You're always balancing that fine line between too much or too little retention. Getting holster flip, especially with X300s with their bezel, where most holster companies are designing that retention. You really want to run a thigh strap with things like that. This fixes that problem. The last point I want to talk to you guys about is the mounts. So this is a traditional QLS multi-mount, some holster companies would call it. It has provisions for holes for QLS and blade tech built into it. The one downfall with this multi-mount setup is it's really large. And when you go with a non-light bearing type holster, it can actually kind of get in the way a little bit. So on the website, what you're gonna see is an option to select either blade tech style spacing or QLS spacing. This one being the multi-mount is what we're gonna use for QLS. If you are running a hanger like this Never Miss, or any of the blade techs, or the Ben Stogers, or this little guy, anything like this, I can guarantee you that every single competition spec hanger is using the blade tech spacing. You're gonna have one hole here, here, and here, or maybe this lower one. Typically it's these top 3. My personal rig right now, same thing. It's using those top 3 holes. In doing that, we're able to make a much smaller impact on the backside of the holster and kind of give you some more options as far as mounting solutions. So on the website, pay attention to the type of mounting you're using. If you are actually using QLS in competition, there are people that are doing that, and they're pairing them typically with like a true north so they can get some ride height adjustments and make sure that their grip is at the top of the belt line for USPSA rules. Just bear in mind that there are going to be some differences when you order a holster with the QLS spacing as compared to the blade tech. So why does the X1 Raptor only come in black? Is this a Henry Ford thing, Model T? No, not exactly. So dual layer holsters. I've got a couple of them right here. I built these ones myself. They are striking to look at, and they are thick with all the C's, right? These are cool designs, and I actually really like these holsters. Now let's get into why I'm not gonna offer these at all. This holster is 2 sheets of 080. The orange one was 080 and 060. So the net value is between 140 and 160 thickness of Kydex. The X1 is a single sheet of 125. Discernibly, between the two, very, very hard to tell a difference in rigidity. The real benefit of the dual layer, in my opinion, is that you get to have all these fun color combinations, right? It's not necessarily a rigidity issue, especially when we're talking with 125 Kydex. And when we're using a magnet as retention rather than friction, it becomes even less of an issue. So the reason we're not doing dual layer is not because I don't want to give you options, and it's not because, you know, I think colors are silly. I love this. I think this is a great idea. The reason we're not doing it is because of manufacturing. Dual layer holsters are immensely difficult to get right. There's a couple of companies that have really dialed in their dual layer holsters, and I commend them because it's easy to get delaminating. It's tough to get the blending just right. So kudos to the guys that have really knocked this kind of design out of the park. But for what we're trying to do with the X1, it's a little unnecessary. 120 Kydex is plenty rigid, and we get all of the features we need out of this design, and I can get it to you at a lower price point because it takes me less time to build this. So no, we're not doing dual layer, but we are giving you customization in the form of laser engraving, anodized washers, plus a neat little carbon fiber looking Tegris piece. I think it's going to really help you set yourselves apart from your buddies. Now, keep in mind, on a light bearing holster like this, we've got a lot of curvatures. The fiber laser that I'm using really needs to have a flat surface to do proper laser engraving. So on an X300 like this, we've got a fairly minimal amount of flat surface area to work with. So Race Glonk, which was selected here, ended up with this font size because of the amount of real estate we had to work with. Conversely, this is a non-light bearing holster and it's got a huge amount of flat surface area to work with. So depending on your holster and the amount of words that you select to be engraved, it's going to change the font size. I am always going to opt towards larger and filling that flat surface. If you have questions about the engraving beforehand, please reach out to me before you place your order. Also, when you are ordering laser engraving, remember it is extremely important to double check your spelling, because whatever you select in there is how it's going to be engraved. That goes for the caps lock too. If you submit your request in all capital, it's going to be engraved in all capital. So take your time when you're doing this laser engraving, because I'm only doing it once, and I'm not going to warranty a holster because you typed in the wrong thing. So I hope you guys enjoy what we're offering with the X1 and the customization. I'm excited to see what kind of creative things you guys come up with. If you have questions about how big it could end up or where it's going to be on the holster, reach out to me beforehand and I'll get you set up. A little bit of housekeeping about the X1 Raptor. We're using a neodymium magnet for retention here, and it does make contact with the muzzle. So when you're reholstering, simply bring your firearm back in the holster, let the magnet do its work. If you're the kind of person that likes to aggressively reholster, eventually you could weaken the magnet and cause a fracture. If that happens, let me know. I'll send you a new magnet. It's as easy as a replacement. But just keep in mind, we're not dealing with a chunk of steel at the bottom here. You need to take care of the magnet, and the holster will last you a long time. If you need to make an adjustment to your magnet, moving it north and south on the bridge, do keep in mind that there is a torque value for that Phillips screw. This magnet with a screw running through it will break in half if you over tighten the screw. That torque spec will be provided with your holster, and we do recommend using a pretty large amount of Loctite just to keep it from moving without having to over tighten the screw. The X1 is a sleek holster by design. We wanted to be able to give those of you who are doing a scoop draw enough space to be able to do that. For those of you not familiar with the scoop draw, a traditional draw, you bring your hand over the top of the firearm and then pull back. A scoop draw is where your hand starts below the holster, and as it comes up, it's grabbing the firearm coming through. There are guys that have ridiculous draw speeds while scooping. Personally, it freaks me out. I have seen people put around through their foot scooping. When you grab a firearm on the way up, you tend to try to contract all of your fingers, and if you're not careful, that can lead to some trouble. But we wanted to give the high-level professional shooters the option to scoop, so we made sure to keep the holster nice and low profile through here so those guys can grab on the way up. Additionally, I wanted to talk to you about the sight channel. USPSA allows holsters to be cut down to about a 1/4 inch below the bottom of the ejection port. We're not doing that with the X1, and here's why. Specifically for light bearing holsters, it doesn't matter if your slide can clear the holster, you've still got to clear a light. So for the light bearing holsters, it makes no difference to have this cut low. And honestly, it just creates an opportunity for a little bit more debris to get in there a little easier. As far as non-light bearing holsters go, we're still not cutting this thing crazy low. I will make sure that it is cut low enough to clear an SRO because of the way they protrude towards the ejection port. But in training with some Grandmaster shooters on the clock, we have found that there is really no significant advantage between having that extra 1/2 inch of Kydex missing compared to this design. The real advantage is coming from the use of magnetism rather than friction on the trigger guards. So the holster is going to come with a nice low cut to clear SROs, but we're not going to go over the top and cut this thing way down to the bottom of the ejection port. It gives us more real estate for the laser engrave, and it also gives the holster a little bit more rigidity instead of cutting it so low. Now I want to be completely transparent about Kydex holsters. There's only so many ways you can wrap a piece of plastic around a gun. There's a lot of companies that offer Kydex holsters. The thing that really separates them from one another is the attachments you use. So in this case for us, it's the magnet and the optic cover. The customization they offer, whether it's dual layer or laser engraving and anodized washers. But the biggest thing is going to be the customer service that you get from the company, the amount of time it takes to get your holster, and the amount of money it costs. So I think the X1 Raptor is really hitting all of those points well. I'm excited to get these out in the public and see what you guys have to say about it. Take care, thanks for watching.